Our friend, our coworker, Bob Rivers, passed away yesterday. He was 68 years old. He had been fighting cancer for a little while and unfortunately lost that battle yesterday. So we're playing Twisted Tunes all morning. He was a trailblazer when it came to the Twisted Tunes. But we have his morning show partner, and I use that term morning show loosely because it's the morning show that starts at noon, and I don't know how they worked out that deal. But it's Peter Zipfel here from Bob and Zip. And then, of course, back in the day in AAF, when AAF was here in Worcester, one of the best morning shows in the area. I grew up listening to it every morning before when I got up, before I skipped school, I would listen to Bob and Zip. And you guys are one of the reasons why I got into this business, only because it sounded like you guys were having just a ton of fun while you're doing the show, and I kept thinking, man, I wish I could get a job like that. And
Mike, that was the whole thing, and it they always say, you never work a day if you enjoy your job, and that certainly was true with us. We didn't have any clue what we were doing, but somehow, seriously, 90% of the time we didn't. And it worked out. And I'm glad you had a career despite your exposure to it at an early age.
Dude, I was riveted to the radio like almost every morning listening to you guys. And Bob, you and Bob had such a great chemistry. How he came from Connecticut, and actually, speaking of Zeppelin, was it his last job before he started working at AAF with you that he got fired for playing too much Led Zeppelin? Was it?
No. You know how this business works. God bless.
I don't. You know what? To be quite honest, I really don't. After 30 years.
Well, then you followed in our footsteps. Yeah. So as far it's show business is pretty uncertain. Yeah. At its best day. And he. I had been playing music and was penniless, and a musician friend of mine said, "Hey, this guy Bob, I always wanted to do radio. That was my dream too." He said, "This guy Bob Rivers over in Claremont, might hire you." And I went over and he threw me on a live remote like the first day. He didn't know if I had any qualifications.
That's the best way to do it.
To make a long. And then he was summarily dismissed from that job for going to a radio convention looking for another job. And if anybody's been in this business long enough, it's always looking for the next, not a golden ring to come around. It certainly isn't that, but, the next job, And then he came down here to Worcester and had started working part-time and then ended up on the morning show, and they replaced a lovely woman, Lana Jones, who was a really great journalist, and they wanted more of a nut job, news guy, and that's kind of how it happened.
And you were a natural fit.
Yeah, no skills required once again. Yeah. So that's kind of how he got started, but yeah, it really was a sad day, but not unexpected. But courageous battle doesn't say enough for how he lived his last years.
So you said you had no idea what you guys were doing. Didn't sound like it at all. But when it came down to all the features and the Twisted Tunes and stuff like that, was it mostly Bob? You had some input in that also too, right?
Oh, in the early days, yeah. And I'm being a little facetious about it. He really he came out of his mother's womb as a radio guy. If you look back, and I just was looking at a lot of Facebook posts yesterday, and there were so many nice things said about him, and he impacted so many people. He really did know the business. He just had it. Radio in his DNA. And people in the business that are like that. Yeah. He was one of them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys had such a good chemistry. What I really enjoyed about your show and your shows here on the Pike was it just sounded like you guys were hanging out, just chit chatting back and forth. and making funny observations. You made it sound so very natural. And I think to me, those are the best radio people, whether you're working with other people or alone. It's making the listener, like you're including the listener. I always think it's like that table of dunks when you walk in and there's those old guys like yelling about the news or the Patriots in the corner. Every morning they're there. And that's, to me, it was like, not like you were the old guys, but it was that same vibe. Like you were just hanging out with you guys, in on the conversation.
Well, to some degree, that was really true. And when I was joking about not knowing what we were doing, a lot of that was we would just, I hate to say it, and program directors hate to hear it, we did wing it a lot. We scripted a lot of stuff, but we did wing it, and it wasn't hard work, to do that. So,
well, you gotta be in the moment. That's tough to do, and especially if you're doing 10 other things at the same time. Can you remember at any point where you were immediately, maybe after you guys did a bit or something, you guys were immediately like, well, we should start looking for a job right now?
Oh yes, there were several, especially with the Twisted Tunes.
Yeah.
And I gotta mention this too. Yesterday we did a little tribute with Bob Goodell on the radio station in Carrie's time slot. And when we started going through some of the Twisted Tune category, I can't believe the body of work that he put together.
Yeah.
I mean, we put a lot of the Christmas stuff together here, but in later years, he churned that stuff out.
Yeah.
Like no tomorrow. And 99% of it was really brilliant. There were a couple of stinkers in there. We found a couple that we didn't air.
You can't get it every time.
Actually.
Yeah, right.
We couldn't air it just because it wouldn't have been politically correct in this day and age, for sure, some of the material. But anyway, I digress.
Well, how long were you guys working together at AAF back in the day?
We're talking about it yesterday. Probably it seems like it was longer than it was. I think and that's because we were on such a roll at the time. Probably 7 years, and then the Bob and Zip, the morning show that starts at noon, I've been with him actually longer than I was in the original version. But of course, he had that monstrous career in Seattle. I mean, he. And he in the industry, he was really an icon and a giant.
Well, National Radio Hall of Famer. I keep calling him a trailblazer, and he was. He was very courageous when it came, like that thing he did in Baltimore when the Orioles started out on, what was it, like a 21 game losing streak or something like that, and he said he would stay on the air until they won a game, and it was it was almost like 300 hours on the air.
Yeah, he definitely was a proponent of the radio bit, asking for permission after the fact,
right? Which
did get us in trouble a few times, and some of the biggest morning shows in the country come to mind who no longer have jobs or whatever exercise that type of approach to employment. So, Yeah,
I had a former boss who would say that to me. He'd say, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. I'm like, okay, you said it. And then I'd do something and he'd yell at me and I'd throw it back at him and he'd get all angry. Don't throw my words back at me. And it's like, you told me.
That's why you have to wear a wire all the time.
Right? Yeah. Wow, man. So you're gonna be on the morning show that starts at noon here on the Pike on Saturday, right? And you're gonna there's some special stuff that's gonna be happening.
I'm not. Yeah, I believe I am. Yeah.
Okay, if you can't talk about it, I get it. But you'll still be on this Saturday. People should tune in.
Yes. Yeah, I will be. It all happened a little quickly. That was the thing. In his health battle. Mm-hmm. Yes, his passing yesterday wasn't unexpected, but it was sooner than anybody expected, which is sometimes how it goes.
Yeah.
Which caught everybody. You know, it was a shock for sure.
Yeah.
But he did a wonderful job of connecting with, a lifetime of friends and radio folk and friends of his family. So he lived life extremely well, and his wife has a lot of credit to her for keeping him in line, because he was unstoppable once he got on to whatever it was. And usually it was working a zillion hours a day. He really was had a great work ethic and loved the business and loved music and loved making people laugh. So we're all pretty fortunate in that regard.
Oh, you can hear that in his twisted tunes. He was not just a radio guy; he was a musician. He produced music, and we're playing a lot of it this morning, so you'll be able to hear it here on the Pike. In his last few days, he was a maple syrup enthusiast. He loved the process of making maple syrup. And like the last video he posted, I think, was about that, and it just didn't. He still had like tons of energy, that Bob Rivers energy and that enthusiasm for chaos, because the video was kind of chaotic.
Well, he one thing in reconnecting with him, this second time around with the Bob and Zip thing, I realized, quite honestly, what a geek he was. He geeked. No, in a really positive way.
Radio is populated with geeks.
Curiosity. How does this work? This new technology is unbelievable. Every time I spoke with him, he says, "Look, you got to get the XRB 2000. This thing's unbelievable." He had a weather station on top of his house. That the maple syrup operation he had going, it was off the charts. He never did anything halfway.
Yeah.
And actually that was true too in the early days when we were going off the rails at times. He had no breaks at times, but thank God we all recovered from that.
Right.
Crazy life.
Yeah.
So,
well, Zip, I appreciate you checking in with us this morning. We're trying to keep it funny, despite Bob's passing, because he like you said, he loved making people laugh, and we'll be playing a lot of his twisted tunes this morning. And then on Saturday, the morning show that starts at noon will be up again, and Zip will have some special stuff planned, I'm sure, if anything, tributes and a lot of Bob's stuff. And we posted a link to his website on our Twitter feed at 100 FM The Pike.
Excellent.
Zip, thank you so much.
He would. You got it anytime, and you guys obviously sound great. By the way, you've got a chemistry happening right there. So take it to the limit.
Well, yeah, we'll see. Some of those limits you guys went to, I'm quite frankly very afraid of. I mean, those are like 70s and 80s limits. They're much different now these days. I don't know if I can afford I don't know if I can afford the rehabilitation. But thank you, Zip. Thank you. Hold on for just 1 second. All right, that's Peter Zipfeld